Welcome to the MFT Clergy-Collaboration presentation by Betsy Scott. MFT Clergy Collaborative Care has really become best practice because it provides a holistic paradigm to meet our clients' needs. This presentation will discuss why collaboration is needed, including the different collaborative models that exist, and what main factors there are out there that make for the successful collaborative experiences. However, we will also discuss the legal and ethical risks and even mitigation steps that need to be taken in order to safeguard and mainly protect marriage and family therapists as they consider collaborating with clergy. Essentially, MFTs and clergy, they both need to understand carefully what type of collaboration they're entering into and really discuss the distinct protocols they need to set up in order to navigate the ethical risks involved with their collaboration. In short, what you will see today is there is a need for collaboration between MFTs and clergy, but there are also ethical concerns. I hope by the end of this presentation that you will have learned these two main objectives today. One is that you will be able to summarize the main ethical and legal concerns the MFT clergy collaboration poses, and that you will be able to evaluate the steps that MFTs need to take in order to mitigate the legal and ethical concerns their collaboration creates. But what you'll first hear from me in this presentation is what even does MFT clergy collaboration look like? What types of models out there exist before we can discuss the risks? Why is there a need for MFT clergy collaboration? The first reason is that simply it's ethical, it reflects competency, and it's holistic. Some might even say the following, that it's actually unethical to not collaborate. Collaboration is basic competency. Here is the ethical principles and psychologists and code of conduct for the APA, the American Psychological Association. What you'll see here is that psychologists are to obtain the training, experience, and consultation if needed, supervision if needed, to ensure the competence of their services, or they make appropriate referrals. The Code of Ethics from the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists says this, that if a therapist for some reason is unable or unwilling to provide professional help for their clients, they must help them obtain appropriate therapeutic services. And also MFTs, marriage and family therapists, do not diagnose, treat, or advise on problems outside the recognized boundaries of their competencies. One thing that it is important to understand is that even Christian counseling associations mention that they need to recognize their own limits of their own competence. So you see that this goes both ways. Okay, this is an example from the American Association of Christian Counselors, where it says that Christian counselors, which can be clergy members, are not to offer services or work beyond the limits of their competence or their scope of practice. You see here with the American Association of Pastoral Counselors that they advise their students, their supervisees, and employees against offering or engaging in or holding themselves out as competent to engage in professional services beyond their training. This is an excerpt from the American Counseling Association that talks about how Christian counselors need to only practice within the boundaries of their competence. So you'll see here that it is part of collaboration, is part of meeting the holistic needs of clients. And it is also part of Christian counselors, whether they are clergy members or not, but clergy and MFTs need to recognize their own limits of their own competence, expertise, and training. So what we see here, another reason, is that while there is a plethora, you can go online and you can find many MFTs, if you're a parishioner in the area. What we see, and the literature confirms this, that people often seek clergy first for help. Some meet with their pastors simply because they cannot afford to pay for therapy elsewhere, but also many just feel really close to their pastors. They've already developed a trust with them. And also there continues to be a stigma within the church around mental health. So while they might actually need to see a therapist, for the type of issue or struggles they have, they will go first to their clergy. What we also see then is in psychologists, with MFTs who are meeting with their clients, that religious values are important to discuss in therapy. What we're seeing is discussing these and seeking spirituality are important to people, and they want to be able to discuss this in therapy. And so often this will come up with an MFT who might not have any background with spirituality or religion. And so they may come up against a limit of their own competency and choose to reach out to a clergy member to meet this need in their clients. We also see that discussing spirituality is not just important to people, but it is actually part of overall health and well-being of our clients. Just as important as the physical, the psychological, and relational needs of clients is spirituality. Care and expertise of clergy is limited, and clergy need to be able to recognize that there are issues that their parishioners will bring to them that go far beyond their reach, and they will need to refer out to specialists. Now, before we continue, I think it's important to note that often MFTs and clergy can feel that they are coming from two worlds that are unrelated to each other. But actually, they do offer a lot of common values and perspectives. Both professions value self-evaluation and interpersonal relationship. They help people assign meaning to life circumstances. They assist in the restorative process in other people's lives, in their clients' and parishioners' lives, in the community. But they also empower individuals to function to their potential. So I think it is wise to think that there are many things that clergy and MFTs have in common rather than so many differences. And lastly, we need to just acknowledge that as healthcare becomes increasingly multifaceted, multidimensional, multidisciplinary, the collaboration has become a professional imperative. So we will discuss now the types of collaborative models that exist for MFT clergy. The basic understanding of a collaborative model looks like referrals and making sure that your network is expanded to include specialists. The minimum level of collaboration, which should be deemed essential for all professional psychologists providing competent care for their clients who have spiritual concerns, is to have enough familiarity with clergy that consultation can be sought as necessary. This goes vice versa for clergy. This is at the basic level and that all of us should be doing. But let's ask this question. This has emerged from McMinn et al. Studies from 2003, in which they asked clergy and psychologists, not necessarily MFTs, but psychologists, how complementary did they see the other professional offers their services? And what they discovered was this: the worst complementary services was mentioned amongst the psychologists' worst experiences with clergy. And yet that was also an area that clergy reported the best experiences in collaborating with psychologists. Let's just break down what this means. This is one obstacle that comes that is connected to why people do not refer as much as they should. Clergy perceived psychologists to be offering services that they themselves were unprepared to offer, but psychologists were less inclined to perceive clergy to offer services that they were unprepared to offer. So need to close this gap if there is going to be a successful collaborative model. And another way is just to make sure that the network includes what should a psychologist do when a fundamentalist Protestant client believes he or she is committed in a particular unpardonable sin, or when a parishioner is experiencing mental health issues that the clergy has no training in. They both need to expand their network so that they can have people to call for consultations and referrals. Within the advanced category, there's four main types of models that I want to just breeze through here before we understand the risks that involve the collaborative process. The first way of collaborating in an advanced way is mental health services within the life of the parish, community concerns, and academics. Within mental health services, consultation and referrals are the most common types of collaborative advanced relationships. One clergy person described being pleasantly surprised when a psychologist sent a client to one of his staff ministers for help with religious questions. Typically, Referrals are still going from clergy to MFTs, but they certainly must be able to go both ways. Within parish life, we'll see these types of things. Psychologists are offering workshops within the parish setting for self-care, parental skills, trauma, depression, anxiety. Certainly they can be co-led, but often an outside specialist will come in and give a workshop within the parish setting. And then offering direct services. So sometimes what happens is a psychologist can be brought in to resolve conflict. An MFT volunteers time to a parish. An MFT does certain types of groups or may offer counseling services to ministers on staff at a church. Another way that collaboration happens is assessments. I personally have experienced this and seen this firsthand when a pastor is hired at a church, especially at a larger church, then a psychological assessment is done. But also this is part of the onboarding process as missionaries are brought into an organization, is that a clinical psychologist will do all of the assessments. Now, already in the community, the collaboration already exists in these places, so we need to acknowledge that. And as well as academics. So I want to touch on the collaborative processes that MFTs and clergy can engage in an academic world. Psychologists are guest lecturers in seminary classes all the time. They can teach in classes. This is my experience taking a class called Self-Care in Missions, which was taught by a clinical psychologist as well as a theologian. In our own MFT classes, our professors have invited clergy as guest lecturers and clergy inviting psychologists to do lifelong learning credits. I just recently attended one for ordained elders in our denomination. It was taught by a clinical psychologist who was doing a workshop on anxiety. So the main two aspects we see that make for a successful collaboration are respect and communication. A minimal clergy MFT model, it does not require complete agreement on fundamental worldviews or values even, but there needs to be enough respect and communication to work well despite these differences. In a study done, again, of McMinn et al. 2003, 200 questionnaires were handed out to clergy and psychologists. 94 were completed by clergy, 145 completed by psychologists. The respondents were asked to describe their most positive and negative experiences in collaborating with a member of that other profession. They looked at these 8 themes of effective collaboration. Of all of these 8 themes, the 2 that emerged as being the most important for successful collaborations are respect and communication. Communication, the psychologist, clergy person kept me informed about the persons we were working with, and respect, the psychologist, clergy person respected me. Respect is really important because it can be unilateral, which we will look at in a second. But in order for there to be a successful collaboration, it needs to be bi-directional. Right now, clergy are still more open to admitting that parishioners needed outside professional care. They are more apt to admit that than psychologists are at this moment. And so you have this idea, a traditional model where the psychologist is seen as the expert coming, so the clergy referring out to the expert, the psychologist. But really it's important for both to realize that the services they offer really do complement one's own expertise and is needed as far as the holistic care for the client. Really, it's simple. The more respect you have, the more collaboration you have. And you can be as creative as you both want with that collaboration. Simply, when clergy value the work of psychologists, they are likely to seek consultation and refer their parishioners to them. When psychologists value the work of clergy and are aware of their religious values of their clients, they're more open to consulting with and referring to clergy. They're more open to contributing to social responsibility through efforts to enhance both parish and community well-being. So really, it's the mutual valuing of each other's profession that is essential. Now, respect characterizes both positive collaborative experiences for both clergy and psychologists, but I think it's important to note again that we're seeing that psychologists felt slightly more respected by clergy than clergy did by psychologists. And this theme came up as the least frequent theme that clergy rated. And it is because they do not feel that psychologists provide as much communication as desired. So the more communication you have, and you will see, not only will it set up a successful collaboration, but it will also mitigate the risks within the relationship. So let's now branch into that for the rest of our time together. Ethical and legal concerns are very real, and it comes down to one main aspect, confidentiality. And this is because for clergy actually operate in a very distinct constitutional niche. They operate in what it seems as a legal void or a vacuum distinct from that of other regulated professionals. So this is important to know, and we will talk a little bit more about the risks that this can pose to MFTs who are partnering with them. Religion, it seems, sadly at times, is largely left to self-policing, giving clergy broad latitude aside from any church sanctions in confidential matters, and leaving parishioners legally unprotected and without recourse against breaches of confidentiality. That in other professional contexts would assuredly amount to malpractice. And I read several cases in which this was the case. Outside the legal system, clergy are ethically, but they're not legally prohibited from disclosing information confidentially received from a parishioner, irrespective of whether that information was received within or outside the confessional context. What does this all mean? This means basically that courts cannot force clergy to disclose confidential information, and at the same time, the courts cannot legally enforce confidentiality as a clergy practice. So, with rare exception, neither lawyers nor the courts nor the governments at large are permitted to compel clergy to disclose the information or provide testimony that violates the confidentiality of the confessional or spiritual counseling. The courts affirm the sanctity of the confidential clergy-penitent relationship. However, having said that, clergy who have licenses, who are licensed ministers and hold denominational licenses or Christian counselor licenses will have ethics that will hold them to confidential standards. And that will have ramifications when they breach that. Here is one such example from the Church of the Nazarene Manual that doesn't talk about the ramifications of what will happen if this is breached, but it does set out the guideline for the fact that confidentiality needs to be held up at the strictest confidence, okay? And shall not be disclosed without the informed consent of the person, except as required by law, and then gives the examples in which confidentiality can be breached. When there is clear and present threat of harm to self or others, when there is a suspicion of abuse or neglect perpetrated on a minor, disabled person, elderly person, or another vulnerable person, and in legal cases when under court order to provide evidence. But you see here that confidentiality has a weightier presence within the Code of Ethics. Therefore, within the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, MFTs must do these things. They must disclose limits on the outside of services to their confidentiality. They must get written authorization or waiver, or if they're before they disclose any client confidences. MFTs need to take steps to protect confidentiality, even in individual records. MFTs use client or clinical materials. If they use their material, client material in teaching, writing, consultation, or research, they actually have to get a written waiver from their clients and take the appropriate steps to protect their identity and confidentiality. This is also in the case of safeguarding and disposing of their client records in a way that maintains confidentiality, even when this happens within practice changes. And also in consultation, which is what we are discussing today. When consulting with colleagues or referral sources, MFTs do not share confidential information that could reasonably lead to the identification of a client, research participant, supervisee, or other person with whom they have a confidential relationship unless they have obtained written consent of the client. So in the event, here is a review of the AAMFT's Code of Ethics on confidentiality. They need to describe the limits written authorization before they could disclose, protect their clients' records at all costs, and get prior consent in the event of a consultation. Now, what kind of risks does this pose to MFTs? In short, the two main risks are if an MFT does not disclose the risk that their collaboration with the clergy will pose to their clients, which is that the clergy cannot provide legal assurance of confidentiality to their clients. And if there has been a breach of confidentiality from the from the MFT to the clergy, and if that goes to court, the MFT could be the sole target of a malpractice lawsuit where the clergy will not be and they will be protected. So failure to inform their clients of the risk to confidentiality, which is involved in that collaborative process, this is also deemed a malpractice oversight on the part of the therapist. This is something that MFTs need to be informed about before deciding how far and what type of collaboration they will have with clergy. Now, here are some ways to mitigate the risks for MFTs. This is a suggestion that has emerged from literature, and it would be that if you're an MFT and you want to refer out or collaborate in the process of sharing information that from your client and from which you have written authorization, and you want to refer a client to the clergy and ask them to offer services to your client, that you would do this with a clergy member who is dual licensed. So that means they are a licensed minister either with a denomination, a church affiliated denomination, or that they hold a Christian counselor license, or it could be an MFT license. So normally in the case of dual licensing, though, MFTs need to be informed that even in the court cases, what clergy are showing is that they have chosen which license they're operating under. So in order to mitigate risk to MFTs, they will need to get in writing that the clergy is dual licensed and that when collaborating, the clergy is operating in writing under their counseling professional license, which holds them to a higher code of ethic. Another thing that MFTs can do is they need to be informed. Before they enter into a relationship, they need to be informed of the code of ethics that is supporting the particular Christian counseling agency that they're licensed with or the denominational code of ethic. As well, they should be aware of what type of training the clergy member has had in the area of ethics. And also, if the clergy is aware of the risks to the professional therapist if collaborative communication is not held in the strictest confidence. The other thing they need to make sure MFTs need to include in informed consent is, again, that they collaborate with clergy who cannot provide legal assurance of confidentiality. However, in the event the MFT needs to disclose information, that they will gain written consent before doing this with any clergy member. Clients need to be informed of this risk when confidential information is shared in that therapist-clergy relationship. Another way is that they need to consider other ways. So if they do not feel comfortable asking the clergy member to be dual licensed, they can consider other ways of collaborating that benefit both professionals. Now, I have discussed the aspect of providing direct services and the type of collaborative models we've looked at. We've said the reason for those mainly is to provide holistic care for the client. However, I would also encourage both MFTs and clergy to think of their collaboration endeavors are contributing to a bigger picture, which is bridging the gap between the world of psychology and the world of theology. And so anytime that they can collaborate is a success. Even if they are not offering direct services to each other's clients, a psychologist is offering services to the church member is being asked to do a workshop in spirituality. All of these other non-direct service types of collaborative models in academic world, they all benefit those who exist with and reside within the world of theology and in that life of the parish, as well as those who live outside of that world and have only known traditional in a way that they view secular psychology. Now, I want to just briefly mention that these are things that actually can mitigate risks for clergy so that they can reduce confidentiality or a temptation of confidentiality breach within the community. This is to limit care to the colleagues in the church who are narrowly defined and clearly identified. So this means not having lay lay leaders do all types of counseling, who have not been trained, do not hold licenses. But they articulate a church policy, not just for responding to breaches of confidentiality, but really to communicate the seriousness this holds, as also, in addition, the result a breach will have, what disciplinary response it will have. So why are we talking about confidentiality? Why is it so important that this not be breached? Well, we can all understand that we should all understand that effective clergy ministry, but also effective professional therapy, they all depend on relationships of trust with their clients and parishioners. So consequently, the foundation for therapy and for collaboration begins to erode when confidentiality cannot be reliably safeguarded. Our clients need to be able to rely on this. So in summary, I want to touch on a few things that I hope you've been able to grasp today. In addition to the learning objectives that were stated at the beginning, I hope that you'll actually see that there are a lot of potential benefits of holistic healing that is made possible through the collaborative care arrangements of MFT clergy, and that this is becoming increasingly apparent. I hope that you were able to see the benefits of this, that the fact that this is necessary for clients and for the larger picture of, again, closing that gap between the world of theology and psychology. Collaborative care between clergy and therapists is ethical. I would personally advocate for it, and I plan to have a referral network in order to do so. There are many ways clergy and therapists can collaborate, from the most basic of models, which is referrals, to the more advanced ways of collaborating. Again, I just attended this workshop on anxiety, and it was phenomenal. And I kept thinking, we need more workshops about mental health in the church. The mental health and awareness of it, and what it looks like to experience things that are plaguing our world and plaguing our parishioners, is not talked about enough in the church. And so anytime that we can do these more advanced creative ways of collaborating, I would advocate for. There are ethical and legal risks involved in the relationship, especially if each party is not informed, especially if there are not informed consents, especially if the clergy is not aware of the risks that their actions will have on the MFT who is partnering with them. So therapists and clergy need to be aware of the ways of mitigating the risks because of this lack of legal assurance of confidentiality that happens within the clergy penitent relationship in the way that the court holds it up, but then also if somebody sues, they also don't enforce it. So as a result, therapists should take special precautions. They should know what type of collaboration they're getting into. They should have ample and clear communication with the clergy member that they are planning on collaborating with to understand the limitations and the boundaries of their collaborative partnership, and make sure that there are distinct protocols. And I would also add, this emerged from the literature, that it's not at all a bad idea for MFTs to seek legal advice before they enter into a collaborative relationship with clergy, especially if their clients are seeing both specialists, just to have a review of the informed consents to make sure that they are adequate, but also to understand the specific legal risks their partnership will have. I have the last slides here are all of my references. I want to again thank you for watching this presentation. I hope that you have left feeling more positive about the MFT clergy collaborative model, that you have learned more about what it looks like, but that you have also learned there can be ethical and legal risks, and we need to be aware of it and ways that we can mitigate those. Thank you for joining me.